Hello and welcome to the Lens Files, where we take a closer look at the lenses we use, how they were made, and what makes each one unique. From their history and construction to their mechanical handling, aperture, quirks, and image character, this is everything you might want to know about the lens, all in one place. Today's file, the Super-Macro-Takumar 50mm f4. The original version of this lens was the Macro-Takumar 50mm f4, which was announced in 1964. A few years later, in 1966, it was followed by the Super-Macro-Takumar 50mm f4. That version was then replaced by the Super Multi-Coated Macro-Takumar 50mm f4 in 1971. The lens has a relatively simple optical construction consisting of 4 elements in 3 groups with a maximum aperture of f4. It comes in the M42 lens mount. It uses a 49mm filter thread and weighs about 248 grams. In the hand, it feels much like a standard vintage 50mm lens. The main thing giving it away that it is not a normal 50mm is the incredibly deep recess around the front element. One interesting thing about these 3 lenses is that they somewhat go against the idea that newer is actually better. The original Macro Takumar, released in 1964, is arguably the most capable macro version because it can achieve true 1:1 magnification. My copy, the Super-Macro-Takumar 50mm f4, and the later Super Multi-Coated Macro Takumar from 1971 can both reach a maximum magnification of 0.5 or 1:2. This means that an object measuring 2 cm in real life will appear 1 cm across on the image sensor or film. My copy has an incredibly stiff focus ring. In fact, this is the first lens I have used. I had to be careful while focusing because the lens nearly unscrewed itself from the M42 mount. As expected from a macro lens, the close focus means very close focus. The information I could find online lists the minimum focusing distance as 23 centimeters. However, it is important to remember that this distance is normally measured from the camera's film or sensor plane, rather from the front of the lens. The actual working distance between the front element and the subject is therefore much smaller, and I could get incredibly close to whatever I was photographing. Here are some sample photographs taken with the Super-Macro-Takumar 50mm f4. There is a slight vignette around the corners when shooting wide open, or close to wide open. That is not particularly surprising considering how deep the front element is recessed inside the lens body. The colors are nice and bright, which is impressive for a lens of this age. There is some purple fringing in the form of chromatic aberration around certain highlights. However, it does not feel like a deal breaker to me. Stopping the lens down creates polygonal bokeh instead of perfectly round circles. That makes sense when you consider that the lens has only 5 aperture blades. You can sometimes get small bokeh bubbles in the background. However, the lens can also produce relatively smooth bokeh depending on the subject and the background. The level of detail from the lens is really good. A good example is the detail in my cat's fur after she allowed me to get close enough to photograph her. close-up photograph of the color lily is another good example of the detail this lens can produce. So that is everything in today's file on the Super-Macro-Takumar 50mm f4. And remember folks, the bokeh is out there.